Yesterday, at 4:12 in the afternoon, the FBI released a file it had kept sealed for 11 years. Not about a person, not about a crime, about a shape. A six-pointed star hanging motionless in the sky over a small town in Nevada, photographed by three separate witnesses who did not know each other, who had never met, who gave identical descriptions down to the exact number of seconds it stayed there, 147. You are about to see what was in that file. And by the end of this video, you will understand why the Bureau sat on it for over a decade, why two of the three witnesses are no longer reachable, and why the last page of the report has a single sentence that isn't a conclusion, it's a warning. Stay until the end, because the final image in that file is the one thing they tried hardest to keep out of the public record. You are standing in your kitchen on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of evening where nothing is supposed to happen, the coffee machine humming behind you, the news playing low on a phone propped against a fruit bowl, and somewhere in the back of your mind you register the words FBI and Declassified, an unexplained aerial phenomenon, the way you register most headlines, briefly, without weight, already moving on. You almost scroll past it. That's the first mistake almost everyone makes with this story, because on the surface it looks like every other conspiracy headline that gets recycled every few months. Another blurry light, another shaky cell phone video, another thing the internet will forget by Friday. But you don't scroll past it. Something about the phrase, six-pointed star catches, because stars don't have points in real life. Points are what we draw, what children draw, what human hands draw when they simplify something round into something symbolic. A photograph of a geometric, symmetrical, six-pointed shape isn't a description of a star. It's a description of a shape someone decided to call a star because they didn't have another word for it. You open the article, you start reading the file. And that's when the ordinary evening quietly ends, though you won't notice the exact moment it happened until much later. The document itself is dry, bureaucratic, deliberately boring in the way government paperwork always is. Case number, field office, redacted names, a cover page stamped with a release date that is, impossibly, yesterday's date. But 3 pages in, there's a transcribed 901 call from a man named Walter Green, 71 years old, calling from his porch in a town so small it doesn't appear on most maps. His voice is calm at first. Too calm. He tells the dispatcher there's a light in the sky that isn't moving, that isn't blinking, that isn't behaving like a plane or a star or anything he's seen in 40 years of watching that same patch of desert sky every single night of his retirement. Then, his voice changes. Not to panic, to something quieter and stranger, something closer to recognition. He says, I think it's looking back. You keep reading, and the file starts doing something documents like this almost never do. It repeats itself. Not by accident. 3 witnesses, 3 separate 911 calls placed within 4 minutes of each other, from 3 points of the town that don't have a direct line of sight to one another. A gas station attendant 19 miles away. A woman driving home from a night shift. And Walter on his porch. None of them called each other. None of them knew at the time that anyone else was seeing what they were seeing. And yet all 3 descriptions matched to a degree that made the responding agent write, in the margins of his own report, the words statistically improbable, and then cross them out and write nothing else in their place, which, if you've ever read a federal document, you know is the closest thing to an admission of confusion a trained agent is allowed to put on paper. The pattern deepens the further you go. The star, if that's still the right word, didn't just appear once. The file contains radar logs from a regional airport showing 3 unexplained returns on the same night, at the same coordinates, each one lasting exactly 147 seconds, before vanishing from the screen without a trace of movement beforehand, without acceleration, without the gradual fade you'd expect from something flying away. It was there, and then the space where it had been was simply empty, the way a word disappears from a page rather than being erased from it. You start doing the math almost without meaning to. 147 seconds, 3 times, 3 witnesses, 3 locations. You don't know yet what any of it means. Neither did the agent who filed the report. What you do know is that somebody in that bureau field office spent 11 years deciding this needed to stay buried, and you're starting to wonder what changed yesterday that made them finally let it go. The file stops being about lights in the sky, somewhere around page 14, and starts being about people, which is when it gets harder to keep reading and harder to stop. Walter Green, the man on the porch, gave a follow-up interview 6 days after the sighting, and in it, he says something the responding agent apparently found disturbing enough to flag for review. He says he'd seen the same shape before, decades earlier, as a child, standing in a field with his father, and that his father made him swear never to speak about it again. Walter had kept that promise for over 50 years. He broke it in a 911 call because, in his own words, "I figured I was old enough now that it couldn't hurt me the same way." You sit with that sentence longer than you expect to. It couldn't hurt him the same way. As if the first time it did. The gas station attendant's account grows stranger too, in the kind of detail investigators only note when they can't explain it away. She told agents that in the 4 minutes after the star vanished, her watch and every clock inside the station were running 11 minutes behind, synchronized perfectly with each other but not with the rest of the town, as though time itself had lagged in that one small building. The night shift driver, the third witness, stopped answering agency follow-up calls after 8 months. Her file simply ends with a note. Unable to make further contact, employer confirms she no longer resides in the state. Nobody accuses anyone of anything. The document never once uses the word danger. But you can feel, in the careful clinical language, the shape of something the agents themselves didn't want to say directly, that whatever this was, it didn't just visit. It left something behind in the people who saw it, some kind of residue that changed how they moved through the rest of their lives, quietly, permanently, and none of them ever fully explained why. By the time you reach the last third of the file, you're not reading it the way you started, casually, distantly. You're reading it the way you'd read a letter meant for someone else, aware you're not supposed to feel this involved, unable to stop feeling it anyway. The report includes internal bureau correspondence, memos between field agents and a division whose name is fully redacted, arguing over whether the case should be closed as unresolved atmospheric phenomenon or escalated. One memo, dated 3 weeks after the sighting, simply reads, "Recommend indefinite hold. Do not close. Do not escalate. Monitor green." Someone in that office believed, 11 years ago, that Walter was still being watched by something, and instead of protecting him publicly, they chose silence. That decision is the real center of this story, not the star in the sky, but the decision, made by people with badges and clearance levels, to let an old man sit alone with what he saw and say nothing. The final section of the file is the shortest, and it's the one the Bureau fought hardest to keep sealed, according to the release notes attached by the Records Division. It contains a single photograph, time-stamped, grainy, taken from Walter's porch on the night of the call, and in it, the 6 points of light aren't scattered randomly the way stars would be. They're arranged with exact, deliberate symmetry, 6 equal points around a dark center, and enhancement notes from a Bureau imaging analyst state, almost reluctantly, that the geometry does not match any known aircraft configuration, satellite cluster, or atmospheric optical effect on record. The analyst's final line in the report isn't a scientific conclusion. It's a question, left unanswered, sitting alone at the bottom of an official federal document. If this was not meant to be seen, why did it stay in place for exactly the same duration, 3 separate times, in front of 3 separate witnesses? You close the file, and the kitchen is quiet, the coffee machine long since finished, the phone screen still glowing faintly in your hand. Walter Green, according to the last update in the record, is alive, in his 80s now, living in the same house, on the same porch, in the same small town nobody drives through by accident. Nobody knows if he still watches the sky. Nobody knows why the file was released yesterday, of all days, after 11 years of silence, with no accompanying statement, no press conference, nothing but a case number and a stamp. Maybe someone inside that office finally decided the public deserved to know. Or maybe the hold was lifted because whatever they were watching for finally happened again, somewhere else, to someone else, and this file is the quiet, procedural first step of admitting it. The document doesn't say, it just ends. And that silence, more than anything in the report itself, is the part you'll still be thinking about tonight when you happen to look up. If this story got under your skin the way it got under mine, hit subscribe, because these declassified files come out quietly, and I dig through every one of them before most people even know they exist. And I want to know what you think really happened in that town. Drop it in the comments, because some of you have theories I haven't even considered, and I read every single one.